Welcome back to the Deliberate Leaders podcast. I am your host and executive coach, Allison Dunn. Super pleased to introduce our guest today. We have with us Mark Zides. He is the founder and CEO of Core Access Consulting, which is an award-winning talent management firm. Mark's new book, The PACE Process for Early Career Success, uses real-life examples, research, and a bit of tough love that will equip the reader to not only just survive the modern work world, but also to conquer it. Mark, thanks so much for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me, Allie. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Kick these off with a deliberate conversation. Mark, what would be your number one leadership tip for our listeners?
So it's cliche, but I'd say be the best listener you can be from a leader's perspective. So always listen to your team, your constituents, your partners, your colleagues, and learn from them every day and try to craft the best solution or answers that you can that'll impact the most people.
Okay, love that. Thank you for that tip. I just want to make sure that I said the title of your book correctly, because you've got, like the hashtag or the pound sign, was that the proper, there's a hashtag before it. How do you pronounce your book title?
Yes, so you are perfect. The PACE process for
the PACE process. Okay. Yeah. With that said, could you share what does PACE stand for, just to kind of give it a level ground with our listeners?
Sure. So the book was written to prepare young individuals early in their career to launch their careers, thinking about everything they need to do to prepare for it, apply, commit, and evaluate. So that's what the acronym PACE stands for. Okay. Now, PACE means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So when I wrote the book, I used PACE wasn't an acronym. And just like any entrepreneur or business leader or coach like you want to try to come up with a process or, a step-by-step approach to being successful, whether it's a framework or a model. So I turned the word PACE, which I was always coaching young adults or students or even kids that I coached on, keep the pace or maintain the pace or pick up the pace or slow down the pace, right? It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So in the context of a business world, I wanted to say, look, you can prepare for a job or prepare for an interview or prepare for a career change. And then what do you need to apply toward that, right? So you need to apply either yourself or your skills, your behaviors. Commit is, do you commit to the role, the job, or making a change? And evaluate is just what that means, right? It's like every year as you're in your career, you should take a look at what you're doing both professionally and personally. And is that the best place you want to be at that time? So that's in general terms what it means.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. Super curious. Tell me a little bit about your background.
So I've been in the learning and development field for almost 30 years. So I've been both in management consulting with large firms, working with talent management organizations or HR organizations like PwC, selling advisory, coaching, talent, succession, learning, training, all those types of solutions. And then I've been an entrepreneur back and forth, trying to figure out what I wanted to do between working for myself and building a business to help companies create change or create, transformation in their employees, whether it's retention or acquisition or development. And then I did it for a few years, like I said, working for PwC and Deloitte. And then I said, after the market crashed in, I guess it was 2008, I was in the financial service practice for PwC as a partner or as a managing director. And I'm like, you know what, this isn't really what I signed up for. It's a terrible time for the whole economy and market, but I want to impact more people. So I restarted Core Access, and we had a journey on building learning experiences for all types of organizations. So whether it was, onboarding training, new hire training, leadership training, manager development training, you name it, we would be an outsourced partner for all those types of firms.
Okay. Cool. That's super broad background. I'm curious, what is the best piece of advice you've received for your own career?
Don't be afraid to make mistakes. So when it comes to building a business and, being in the trenches every day. It's okay to make a mistake, and it's okay as long as you learn from it and apply it where you're not going to hopefully do it again. But that's been some of the best advice ever. It sounds, again, like motherhood and apple pie advice, but it's really been good advice.
I did never think that we're really making mistakes. We're just always learning, and you have to make mistakes in order to get the big learning out of certain things. So that's a great piece of advice.
Spoken from a true coach. Absolutely.
True. What types of tips would you have for professionals that are looking to continue like an ongoing career development? So you create learning platforms, but what would be your guidance for someone who maybe doesn't have that in their business or their company?
Right. So, I would say learn something new every day. Try to learn something new and broaden your horizons. And as part of that, step outside of your comfort zone. So, even if your own company doesn't have, like you said, the platforms or the assets to provide training, there's so many social tools out there or platforms that you can learn from. So whether it's, for example, LinkedIn Learning or, there's other types of online materials, go buy a book, in the area that you feel like you need to develop your skills, download an Audible, listen to a podcast. So I feel that there's so many different platforms that somebody can self-develop on a daily basis. So I know a lot of people don't have time, but come up with a strategy or sort of a timeline over per quarter, right? Or per year. Say, look, here are my, whether you receive feedback at work around some of the things you need to work on, and find ways to actually enhance your skills or change your behaviors around those things.
Yeah. So what would you say are some of the defining qualities that help our millennial and our Gen Z generation succeed in today's workforce?
Great question. I get that a lot, and I don't think I answer it the same way every time. But I would say be different, because the Gen Zs and the Gen Ys are different, right? They think differently, they behave differently, they're digital natives. They, are very much into social causes like climate change or police brutality, things like that. And what can they do when they go to the workforce and apply some of that energy and different thinking from people like myself, that's a Gen Xer, right? That I'm just, focused or wired a different way. So I think that, the community sort of thinking and sort of the collaboration that they can bring to the workforce to embark and make change, I think is really important. So don't feel like you have to, follow authority at like maybe, but at the same time, use your social sort of thinking and your attitude to kind of, make change in some of these organizations. And we do see it, right? We see that large companies like, Google and others have unlimited vacation time now, right? You and I would never think of that, never mind 20 years ago, but even 5 years ago. So a lot of change is happening. And I think that if they bring that energy and focus into the workforce, it'll really help the future work.
Thank you. I'm curious, what guidance or tips does the book outline, or would you give a listener who's really looking to expand their professional network, and maybe that's not been a focus yet, but it needs to be in thinking about how to level up or do something more fulfilling?
Yeah, another great question. So I think, going back to social media or a platform like LinkedIn is really important, right? So I feel that building your personal brand and your personal network is very important. I talked about that in the book. So a practical example is make sure your LinkedIn profile is professional and you're following the groups that are important to you. You obviously have to follow the company or industry that you're in and you want to actually be part of. Be proactive, and maybe in other social platforms, create your own communities or groups that you can get like-minded people involved in the same causes or the same type of work that you'd like to do. So I think that, those types of initiatives actually are really important young in your career.
Awesome. What is some of the key things that you look at when you're giving guidance about attracting top talent? So what does the candidate need to kind of like, what are the check things that you're looking for that help get that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm old school, so I'm looking
Okay.
for, executive presence. I'm looking for somebody who's got some research done on the company or about me, or, can kind of has a strong understanding of the industry or why they want to work there, what's their why, or kind of what's their purpose of wanting to work in an industry or company. So I'd coach somebody on doing the research up front and making sure they're mapping their goals and what they want to do to what the company's goals are as well. So I think some of the, tendencies around preparation, making sure that, you are prepared for a video interview, right? There's not as many face-to-face videos, face-to-face conversations as we may have had 5-10 years ago, sort of pre-pandemic. So you have to, make sure you have the social cues kind of understood. You can practice a mock interview through a Zoom or through a platform like this. So be really prepared, I guess, is the overarching message that I'd say to someone young in their career, whether it's through research, knowing who you're interviewing with, trying to understand kind of, what some of the reasons why you actually want to work for that company or that role.
Okay. And you know what? I feel like you say you're old school, but it's like the basics, right? Like, don't forget the basics.
Right.
It's really important.
Yeah. And, and again, to get tactical for a sec, send that thank you letter, right? Like, send a thank you note after you interview with somebody, not just the one person, but if you interview with 4 or 5 people, send one to everybody. And one of the things that strikes me, Ali, is, a video thank you note. Those are kind of different and interesting, right? So that's a little out of the box, but I actually like that, because if somebody just sends a quick, video, thank you so much, I welcome the opportunity to learn more about your company. Like, that's a nice little touch. Again, it demonstrates that they're a little bit more creative and thinking differently. So again, whatever you need to do to help yourself stand out from another candidate or another person, I'd advocate for that.
Yeah, it's a great tip. And hopefully our listeners are listening in, because it absolutely does set you apart. I agree. It can also hurt you if you don't do it well, but it will set you apart in one way, for sure. Mark, what advice do you have for building and leading teams? That is, I feel like a key opportunity inside every single company today.
Building teams is more challenging now. I feel that it's been prior to the last few years, and that's because a lot of what we do is virtual. So team building, I feel, is a lot of in-person collaborative work, whether it's, in person or in a room where everyone's sharing ideas and collaborating. So I would advise people or leaders that if they can replicate that in the context of a business tool, if they can't do it in person, that's what I think is really important nowadays. So whether it's a Microsoft Teams or a Zoom call, there's a lot of different, aspects to those platforms that you could poll, you can actually have breakout rooms, you can, provide feedback, you can do a lot of those same things that maybe you used to do in a conference room that now you need to do online. So I'd make sure that all of those tools and capabilities are in place. And I think the other part of managing teams is connectivity and really feedback loops is what, coaches like you and me will call it, right? So always check in, don't be overbearing, like check in every day, but is there any other way that if I'm a team leader, can I help you? Can I help you get to the next point? Or, coaching people sort of in, be their mentor, not necessarily directly, but indirectly. So I feel that collaborative and communication is really important. And there's a lot of great tools out there to do it where you can't do it in person, whether it's Slack or some other, collaborative tools. But I think, connectivity is really, really key to success in uplifting a team toward the right direction.
Thank you. All super good tips. I'm just going to I think it's my final question as far as thinking through the career success process. And so I know that there's a lot of shifting going on in the world right now. So where should someone start to find the perfect job? Where do you start?
Well, I think you start and find your why, right? Like, what's your why or what's your purpose? I think
that's easy, right?
It should be. I mean, you would think that what do you want to do? What's going to drive you? What's going to motivate you? What's the fundamental purpose of actually work, right? If you want to be work in an ecosystem or a company, that's a great choice. If you want to be an individual contributor, that's another choice. If you want to be an entrepreneur, that's another choice, right? If you want to work remotely, that's another choice. So I think some of those, checklists is something that someone has to sort of think through prior to going, for that role or for that job. What industry do you want to be in? Do you want to be in, again, biotech or financial services? So a lot of those decisions are, as you know, are made for you based on what your background is or where you went to college or what your major was. But I would say, apply yourself to what's going to make you feel the most whole, happy. And I know it's not perfect because, getting a job is competitive and it's not easy, but if you can, try to match your values to a company's values. So look on a company's value page and make sure that they have similar values that you do. So some of that research that I mentioned before is really important to kind of find out the type of company you want to work for.
Okay. So starting with recognizing what you see, what you want your future to be, what you want to be doing, what your values are, what would be your next most appropriate step? Sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, I mean, I think then it almost gets into, what is it going to take for you as an individual to earn the right to get an opportunity at that company, right? Get an interview, get a job, get a at bat. So that's what I mentioned earlier about researching or networking or using LinkedIn to figure, okay, well, who's the hiring manager? And sometimes companies will just post and they hire internally anyway, right? Which is frustrating. But how can you break down some of those barriers and get creative to have that decision maker who's the hiring manager want to hire you? And what can you do on your own to make yourself stand out from all the other candidates and everyone else? I don't know if that answers your question, but I think that's sort of the practical next step.
It absolutely does. I'm just curious, will you share with us what your most rewarding job you've ever had?
The one I have now. I mean, I think that it's really when you're the happiest and when feel like you're adding value and making impact is when, you're the happiest. Every job I ever had, I enjoyed, I learned from, but I feel like from a career progression perspective, at least the way I think about it is you always want to have that work-life balance. And you want to have that challenge on the work side, but then you want to feel fulfilled after you do something, whether it's for the company or people on your team. So in the situation I'm in now, I feel like I have the opportunity to add a lot of value, but I also have an opportunity to learn from everyone that works with me. And that's very fulfilling. And you can't always get that, as you know, in every company, right? So
how lucky are we that we do, right? Yeah.
I agree.
You work with a lot of organizations. In your opinion, what is the most challenging thing that businesses and entrepreneurs will face in today's work environment?
So, if you're an entrepreneur or you're a business owner, it's really finding new business or rainmaking or business development or sales or, right? I mean, we're in business, unless you're a nonprofit or other businesses, which are very fulfilling and maybe even more fulfilling, but if you're in a business that's organized where you're trying to make money, it's hard to sell, right? It's hard to open that door and get the decision maker to want to speak with you, whether you're, selling a software, a widget, or something else. So I think as an entrepreneur, that's one of the most challenging things is to figure out the channel or the best way to sell your service or your product. And I think there needs to be some thinking on the best way to do that, whether it's multi-channel or marketing or direct dialing or old school cold calling, right? I think that's one of the hardest things for an entrepreneur or a business owner to do. If you're a successful coach like you, a lot of it's word of mouth, right? So you coach somebody and then someone else says, I need to speak to Allie, and it comes back.
Thankfully, yes. Now, not in the beginning though.
Right. So when you first started, how did you get your new coaching client, or how did, so that's probably the most challenging thing, I would say, to answer the question.
Okay. I 100% agree. I feel like being in a different phase now, I think it's more of, getting talent, but initially, until you get the right amount of sales, you can't get talent. So I agree.
Yep.
Mark, what is the best way for our listeners to connect and or find you?
Yeah, thanks for that. So I have a website, www.markzides.com. So, you can connect with me there. You can send me an email, mark@markzides.com. I'm on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. If you just reach out on LinkedIn, I'm happy to DM with you and kind of learn about, how I can help. So I'm sort of an open networker by nature, and, happy to help anyone at any point in their career, whether it's on the coaching side, on the talent side, on the learning side, or I also do some investing and help startups and, board work, things like that. So happy to help anyone who wants to kind of grow themselves or grow their business.
Fantastic. I will make sure that I include those connections in the show notes as well. So, Mark, I just want to thank you very much for joining us today and sharing your insights.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciated the time. Thanks.
My pleasure.